Welcome, everyone, to today's Town of Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is February 10th, 2022. First of all, state that the mask rule we have today, and this changes, but today is when you're speaking, you may remove it. And that's true of the members too. When you're done, please put it back on. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anybody else is recording the meeting, please notify us. The meeting of the ZBA is being conducted remotely in accordance with Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and shall afford adequate alternative means of public access via Microsoft Teams by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. Then you have to punch in the conference ID number, which is 479-353-69, and hit the pound. Or you can join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we'll post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue/hearing or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. To authorize this form of meeting, I'm going to call for a roll call vote. This is a hybrid form, and therefore we need to do that. So all members will be voting. Buck? Yes or no?
James M. Upson, I support this format.
Randy?
Randy Potash, I support the format.
Paul C. Semple, I support this format.
David S. Nixon, I support it.
David R. Thompson does support it.
David H. Veach, I support it as well.
I must ask that any citizens or non-board members participating in the call via the phone only, then they give us their name and the last four digits of their phone number for ID purposes. The way we'll be conducting the meeting today is the hearing notice will be read by the lady to my right, that is Sarah B. Clark. She's the town's PPO, that's Principal Permitting Officer. She also happens to be our Executive Secretary as well as the HBDCs. The representative or the individual for the appeal or the application will then make their presentation. When they are done, I will ask for anybody in the audience, either here in person or in Microsoft Teams, who wish to speak in favor of the appeal or the application to do so. When that is done, I will read any and all letters in the file. Following that, I would ask for anybody, either here or again on Microsoft Teams, who wishes to speak either against the appeal or has a specific question to join in the meeting. If there is any of that, there could very well be some rebuttal. Then we would ask board members to direct their questions to anyone present who had participated in either the delivery of the app or the conversation. When we were done with that, we would then close the public hearing and go into deliberation. Deliberation is when we talk about how we feel about what we've heard and how we might or might not vote. That is not included with the public unless a member introduces an individual into the discussion. We would then vote on it. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to be successful for any ZBA, you must get a majority, that's a supermajority vote. In our case, there are 5 votes, so you must get 4 in favor. In those boards where there's only 3 members, it has to be a unanimous vote. All votes today will be taken by roll call. And the only other thing I can say is always be respectful, please, and we will certainly be respectful of you. Our first order of business are the minutes from the previous meeting. Paul?
I will move to approve the minutes as published for January 27, 2022.
I second.
Okay, and the voters today are Buck,
I approve.
Paul,
I approve.
Dave,
I approve.
Dave?
I approve.
And myself, and I approve. Thank you. All right, Sarah, let's begin with application 21-095, please.
Application number 21-095, John R. Rhinelander and Amy Dixon Rhinelander, care of George Riley, 63 Brooks Trail Road, Brewster, Mass. 02631. Owners of property located at 571 Old Harbor Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 16H, Block 4A, Lot C2. The applicant proposes to install exterior mechanical system appliances, pool equipment, and relocated AC condensers 10.7 feet from the northerly abutter where a 25-foot setback is required. The proposed mechanical system appliances will be located next to the existing generator, which is 9 feet from the northerly abutter. The lot contains 74,800 square feet in an R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw. This was continued from January 13th, 2022.
On January 26th, the board received the following note from George Riley. He writes, "We are withdrawing our application for a special permit number 21-095, requesting to locate mechanical equipment within the 25-foot setback to the property line. We would like to reserve the right to reapply in the future if necessary. We thank the board for their time." So, Paul, a motion for the withdrawal, please.
Yes, I'll move to grant the request to withdraw without prejudice.
I second that.
Okay, that's a roll call vote. Buck? Paul?
All votes yes?
Dave?
Dave Thompson votes yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you all very much. Okay, Sarah, application 22-002.
Application number 22-002, 19 Old Wharf Road Nominee Trust, care of Michael D. Ford Esquire, P.O. Box 485, West Harwich, Mass. 02671. Owner of property located at 19 Old Wharf Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 16I, Block 31, Lot C1. The applicant seeks a dimensional variance under Section 8D2C from the requirements of Appendix 2 to allow for building coverage in excess of the maximum allowed. The proposed building coverage is 5,879 square feet, 11.5%, where 10% is the maximum allowed. A dimensional variance is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 10, and Section 8D2C of the Chatham Protective Bylaw.
Mr. Ford?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Attorney Mike Ford. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, 19 Old Wharf Road Nominee Trust. The principal of this trust is Meg McCarthy. This is a property that Meg has recently purchased after residing at 116 Old Wharf Road, down the street, bottom of the hill, from this site for many years. So the good news is she's staying in Chatham. So we're here seeking variance relief from the building coverage requirement for the proposed redevelopment plan. The variance is sought pursuant to Chapter 48, Section 10 of the general laws and Section 8D2C of the Chatham Protective Bylaw. Some background. Joining me in presenting this today is the architect, Patrick Ahern. I believe Patrick may be on remote. Dave Clark, the site engineer, is also available and I believe is on remote. I'm not sure, but I believe that Meg is able to participate remotely from where she is at the moment. She is in Florida on business and was unable to be here in person. She wanted to be, but the fact that it's a hybrid meeting and it is remote gives her an opportunity to participate in that fashion, and she appreciates that opportunity. So I think it's important in looking at this particular petition in context to take a moment and describe what is currently on this site. It's improved with a single-family home, originally the main portion built around 1803. An L was constructed on the back sometime later, although the L clearly is also a fairly old portion, not as old as the original house. There's a picture here of the original house, and you can see it without the L on it, that dates back to circa 1803. I'm not sure who the owner of the horse was, Mr. Chairman, or who was in the stagecoach there, but I do know in reading the Form B, which is the official document filed with the Massachusetts Historical Commission back in the 90s by the then Historical Society and authored by Joe Nickerson, who was then the town historian, that this was originally the home of the Nickerson family. Caleb Nickerson was the Nickerson family that started in this home. His family lived there for at least, as near as they could tell, 50 years. His son, Simeon, and his family lived there. I note that because Simeon was the lightkeeper back when there were two lighthouses down at the cut where there is one lighthouse now. And they resided in this house when they were the lightkeepers there. In addition, again, according to the town historian Joe Nickerson in the 90s, this house was also used summers in the 30s and the 40s by Harold Brett. Harold was the illustrator of many of the Joe Lincoln novels, many of which took place in the Lower Cape towns, including the town of Chatham. I mention these just to give you an idea of the importance to this house that's on the screen now, to the historical significance and history of the town, and its nexus to that history of the town. The proposal that's before you today is proposing to keep the original house. That's looking at it from the front as it exists today. The L portion in the back will be removed, as will the barn. There is a barn on the site, or a garage, I should say. And from a zoning standpoint, the garage is significant because it currently has an additional dwelling unit in it. It is listed as an apartment on the assessor's records. Sarah has now put up the site plan for the proposed development. Why are we here? This lot contains over 58,000 square feet, not quite enough to support two dwelling units on one site, for which you need 60,000. So it's non-conforming from the standpoint that there are two dwelling units on the site. It also has dimensional nonconformities in terms of the abutter setback to the rear. So there are two nonconformities on the site. It's a generous lot, as I said, over 58,000 square feet. There is a portion of the parcel, and Sarah has the little hand there that runs along the easterly boundary line, where the property slopes off fairly dramatically. And that, by virtue of the revised floodplain maps in 2014, is now the top of a coastal bank. And so everything east of that little jagged line, as a result of the change in the floodplain maps, the FEMA maps in 2014, which were incorporated into the zoning bylaw in 2016, is now Conservancy District. The significance of that to this petition is that that land can no longer be utilized to compute buildable upland. Buildable upland is what is the defining factor for building coverage under the bylaw. And so when the floodplain maps changed in 2014, the base flood elevation on this site moved from elevation 10 to elevation 15. So it was farther down towards the easterly boundary line, moved up to that point. And that reduced the buildable upland on the site. Currently, using the new line for computation, which Dave Clark has determined for us, the buildable upland on this site is a little over 51,000 square feet. And so the proposed house, which I'm going to have the architect walk you through in a minute, is within, using that new buildable upland formula based on 51,000 square feet, covers about 9.7% of the lot. Therefore, it conforms the lot size, the maximum lot size coverage on this site is 10%. We're here because the applicant, Meg McCarthy, desires to preserve the house that I showed you on the screen a few minutes ago, the old Caleb Chase house, the original 1903 portion. And that's the rectangle to the left-hand side of this screen that you see. As a result of adding that to the plan to preserve that house, the coverage goes to 11.4%. While we have nonconformities on this site, both in terms of use, 2 dwellings under a lot under 60,000, and a setback, we don't have a nonconformity as to building coverage. The gravamen of that is that to exceed building coverage requires a variance. Thus, we've made an application under 40A Section 10 and under 8D C2 of the zoning bylaw. So before I get further into the criteria and legal arguments as they pertain to the variance, I'd like, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, to have Patrick Ahern, the architect, walk the board through the McCarthy residence and the plans, which you'll see as he walks through incorporate the old 1803 portion of the historical dwelling. Patrick, are you out there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You have the floor, according to the chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. What I'd like to share with the board is the approach that we took to the property in consulting not only our client, Meg McCarthy, but in her conversations with the neighbors and the abutters and people that know this property very well. There was a strong consideration that we were asked to do in terms of maintaining the height and scale of the existing house in regard to the new property and the new house. And so this is basically a companion house that emulates in character and volume in terms of height the existing historical house. And the concept is that this, from a historical or implied historical point of view, this could have been a companion house on the lot. As Attorney Ford mentioned, currently there are 2 dwelling units on the lot. The perception and imagery of this lot, this 58,000 square foot lot in a 40,000 square foot zone, almost 19,000 square feet larger than the underlying current zoning, would read very much as a 1.5-story house, which it is, with wings that have been added on over time. Perhaps this barn that we're showing could have been another structure. And the idea of creating an ensemble of historic buildings that complement the existing true historic house was a design direction that we collectively felt was very important, and I believe embraced by the letters of support that you have received. Whereas, if we had chosen to build much more of a 2-story house we would alleviate the overage in the buildable upland, and we would not be here today. But the net result would be an architecture that would not be complementary to the character and scale of the existing house. I would say that it would be out of context and character and scale of the neighborhood, as there have been a few newer houses built nearby that are much more volumetric, that may comply with zoning, but clearly are out of character and scale for this historic area of Chatham. So the reason why we took this tact was to really be much more sensitive to volume and character of the neighborhood. But in doing so, in creating this sense of implied history, where pieces have been added on over time, that requires a larger footprint to tell that story, as opposed to just a big builder box sitting on the lot that might comply with zoning, but would nevertheless not really tell the story of the next few chapters of this long history of this property to be. So just as a prelude to the presentation architecturally, I thought it was very important for this board to understand the context and why we did what we did, not only for the benefit of our client, but for the immediate neighborhood, and really create a house, once it weathers, that really could have been the companion house that was added on over a period of time to the existing antique house, which we've incorporated within the ensemble of buildings on the lot. So if we could move forward, that would be helpful. Again, we have a barn-like structure that's attached to the house. That again, all of these buildings are no taller than the antique house. The ridge lines match, the pitch of the roofs are very similar, so that this idea of implied history and houses being added on over time really tells the story of not only how this could have been, but how so many houses in Chatham have developed over its long history of wonderful New England vernacular architecture. So the nature of New England architecture is it may have been a house 300 years ago, and then someone built a barn, and then someone needed another wing, and the family grew. So this sense of how things grew over time is particularly pertinent to the town of Chatham, as well as other old communities in New England. So I believe this approach is well founded in historical context. Next, please. Again, we're working with topography and certainly adjusting some of the heights and things. And the secondary wings, as you can see, are about 3 feet lower than what we call our version of the original cape. The use of materials in terms of stone veneered foundations, stone chimneys, wood shingled roof, historic true divided light windows, all tell the story of materials and details that are found in many, many, many of the historic houses in the community. Next, please. Again, facing towards the water, we have a covered porch. And again, you can see how those secondary wings are considerably smaller. They're one-story spaces with a little bit of a cathedral ceiling in the family room and the breakfast room and the master bedroom, but that the volume considerably steps down from the ridge of the, what we call the implied original like cape. Next, please. This is the, if we could just move to the next one. This is the original house, which we are preserving. We've been in front of the Historic District Commission. They unanimously approved the relocation of this house and the wing being removed and the restoration of this house. So all the details that are found on this house, the window patterns, the use of the shutters, the roof pitches, the chimneys, all of these cues are incorporated within the new house that we are proposing. So when it's all done, project is landscaped and weathered a year, all of these buildings will look very much as if they were telling one story. and being consistent with the historic nature of this very large lot. As I said, it's almost 19,000 square feet over the minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet. And again, if we didn't have the change to the upland calculations, we would be at 9.7%, and we would not be seeking the relief that we're asking for today. Next, please. Again, the side elevations clearly show the roof pitches match the antique house. This is the antique house. It's really one story on the architecture of this property as we see it. Next, please. I think that might be it. Again, on the site plan, you can see how the antique house is used as a bookend to the driveway area and the main house, and the barn is centered between the two structures. The gabled ends of each house, which mimic each other from the street, from the road, from Old Wharf Road, match each other, and this concept of a courtyard and arrival space really works quite well. That really tells the story of how this ensemble of buildings could have been created many, many years ago. We meet all the dimensional setbacks and exceed them by a significant amount. As Attorney Ford stated, the existing secondary structure is non-conforming. It doesn't meet the setbacks. And again, it's got a kitchen in it. It's a second dwelling unit on the lot, of which we would only have one. So many good things are happening from the zoning point of view in terms of removing the nonconformities, in terms of setback and in use. And had we been allowed to calculate the full size of the lot at the 58,871 square feet, we would be under the 10% requirement, just as a point of reference in terms of scale of lot that we actually have here. I think I'll turn it back over to Mr. Ford for some further commentary.
May I, Mr. Chairman? Continue? Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Hearn, for that overview of the elevations. So, a couple of more salient facts before I move to the variance criteria, which is our burden to present to you. Just to emphasize again what Mr. Hearn was just saying in terms of the size of the lot. You know, it's interesting, and as I prepared for this and reviewed the history of the zoning bylaw again in Chatham, you find that lot area is defined when used for building purposes as that area which is not below mean high water, is not in a waterway itself or a water body, and is not part of a way. If you take that definition, the whole lot is lot area for building purposes. But if you read the bylaw closely, that just gets you in compliance with the minimum lot area requirements. You then need to move to buildable upland in order to determine the building coverage that you can have on the site. But you don't see that distinction too often in bylaws, and so it was good that I went back and saw that. And if we were to use the area which the bylaw defines as the area for building purposes, that's the language of the bylaw, we'd be at 9.9%, as Patrick pointed out, with the antique house, and would not be here for the variance. So the antique house represents approximately 1.5% of the coverage that is the 11.5% that we're at. We're 9.6 without a little more than that. I guess it's 1.9%, excuse me, of the total coverage. It's just under 1,000 square feet. It's about 963 square feet. We're over the 10% by around 700 odd square feet of that total. So that's the delta that you're looking at in terms of the variance here. So what do we have to show to be eligible for a variance? And I don't use the word entitled to a variance because I know that even if we meet variance criterias, the case law in Massachusetts is very clear. Even if you meet the three-pronged test, you're not entitled to a variance. A variance is a discretionary decision that this board has to decide to grant, and we understand that. So the variance criteria, and I did submit these. I hope that they did get around to you. And I'd like to take a moment and go through them. The first criteria, which is always the criteria, I think, on which most of the discussion and emphasis is given, is the criteria that requires, and I've got that listed as number 1, that owing to circumstances relating to soil conditions, shape, or topography of such land or structures, and especially affecting such land or structures but not affecting generally the zoning district in which it is located, a literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance or bylaw would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petition or the appellant. So what's involved here that we're trying to look at to determine whether or not there is a hardship? I think there's two things, and frankly, I think without the combination of them, we would not be eligible to apply for a variance. But I think given the two things that are present, the two unique conditions that I will review with you, or circumstances, that the combination of those do give rise to meeting the requirements of that paragraph 1. Well, how does that work? First, the 1803 antique house, as it's been described. It's clearly unique to this property. It exists here. I've reviewed some of the facts about its history, its nexus to Chatham, its importance as an historical structure. The house is one that cries out to be preserved. The applicant bought the lot, designed a house that met the zoning bylaw, 9.7%. However, in going to the Historical Commission and realizing the importance of this house, and at no small expense, a considerable expense, has agreed to save the 1803 house, move it on the site to where it's to be located, have it fit in, and design, frankly, a new house that is compatible with the historic house, finds herself in the position of building coverage being at 11.5%. So I'd suggest that first, the house is unique, it's historic, it's unique to this site, it should be preserved, the applicant is willing to preserve it. A literal enforcement of the bylaw, that is strictly applying the building coverage percentage of 10%, results in the hardship. Why? Because she designed a compatible house at 9.7, but has been encouraged and has been willing to take on saving the historic house, which adds the additional building coverage that puts her over the top. So a literal enforcement of the building coverage provision results in the hardship. Now, I think that if I merely had the structure, I don't think that I'd have enough in terms of number 1. But this particular lot also has a topographic condition. The lot, as you can see it on the site plan, falls off fairly dramatically as you head to the east, towards the water, towards a wetland that comes in off the water and crosses the road there. As I indicated, in 1998, the elevation for the floodplain there was 10 feet. Through no action of the property owner, but merely by definition, The FEMA maps have now come back at elevation 15. That's now atop of a coastal bank by definition. By virtue of being the top of a coastal bank by definition, it's Conservancy District. Again, by definition, no act of any property owner. Conservancy District cannot be used to determine buildable upland. So we have a topographic condition on this lot. I'd suggest that further results, if you apply the bylaw literally and say, even though it's high and dry for the full 58,591 square feet, you can only use 51,000 square feet as a result of this to determine buildable upland. That's the result of this topographic condition. That's the result of applying the bylaw literally, the definition of buildable upland. So if you take both of those things together, the historic house, the property owner didn't go out and simply design something that was going to exceed zoning. She designed something that was compatible, conforming, 9.7%, but wants to preserve this in the public interest and in the streetscape, a piece of Chatham, part of the history of Chatham. If you apply the bylaw literally, that takes her over and results in the hardship. Frankly, the hardship results from the fact that she wants to preserve an historic house, preserve a streetscape on the road, and the entire neighborhood wants it, and the Historic Commission thinks this is a good plan from that standpoint because the house results in being saved. So, prong number one of the three-prong test for a variance, and you need all three, it's conjunctive, it's not disjunctive, is always the most difficult to get your arms around. And I've said a lot there under one, but I really think that if I was on the board and I'd say, well, geez, you know, if we're going to start giving variances for buildable upland because of changes in the floodplain, we're going to have a run on variances. That's not the case if you vote for this, because it's got the historic house. You've got to have both things, it seems to me. Unique conditions specific to this lot. This house doesn't exist anywhere else. And if you have those things, this can be differentiated, I'd suggest respectfully, from other situations where somebody might come in and argue, gee, I've got this topographic condition and it's through no fault of my own and I need some relief because I've designed a house that exceeds it. We don't have that here. We have somebody who designed a house to meet it, 9.7%, but has this unique circumstance where it's in the public interest that the antique be saved. Thus the need for the variance. The second prong of a variance. Desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. Here, I'd suggest to you that granting the variance serves the public good. How? It saves the historic house and allows a building program to go forward, as described by the architect, Mr. Ahern, given his skills in laying this out, that creates a streetscape that is compatible with that historic house. So I think it's in the public interest and the public good will be served by granting this. Again, just to emphasize, if you looked at the entire lot, all of which is dry, we're at 9.9%. Third, the dimensional nonconformity with the setback is eliminated. So there's greater compliance with the zoning bylaw from a setback standpoint. Fourth, the two dwellings on one lot, on a lot under 60,000 square feet, is gone. Now, I do want to point out to the board that the antique is proposed to have a kitchen in it, but no bedroom. So it is not a dwelling. It has one main room for dining purposes, the fireplace in that, and then the kitchen. I did discuss with the building commissioner at some length whether having two kitchens might trigger some other sort of zoning relief. And his decision on that was no. He does not believe that that requires any additional zoning relief, that what we've applied for is fine. He then said to me, why wouldn't your client just stick a bedroom in the antique and keep the right to have two houses on one lot? To which I responded, she realizes that she's asking for something with the variance and believes that she ought to be giving things up as well. And so there's no bedroom in the antique. That can be a condition that there never would be, and that we'd be limited to one single-family home on this property. The third prong, you got to be able to grant the variance without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the zoning bylaw. Well, this is a difficult one because obviously when you seek variance relief, it's for something that's otherwise prohibited. So you ask the question, how can you grant a variance and it's within the purpose and intent of the bylaw? And the only way I've been able to make sense out of that over my many years in doing land use is, well, something that meets the test for a variance, it's then contemplated that a variance could be granted. The variance procedure's in the bylaw. And so if you find one of these very unique, unusual situations where a variance looks like it can be granted, well, then it's within the intent and purpose of the bylaw. Why? Because the variance provision's part of the bylaw. Maybe sounds like a circular argument, but it's the best that I've been able to find, and wherever I've been argued a variance on the Cape, that usually is where you end up in these situations. So I think you can find that we meet the criteria of 40A Section 10 and Section 8 D, C2 of the bylaw for variance conditions. Again, does that mean we're entitled to a variance? No. However, I feel that there is enough here that the board, looking at all the benefits in this plan, from an historical perspective, from a planning perspective, from a visual perspective, particularly from the streetscape with this program, that you can grant this variance. I'm happy to take questions about the variance conditions or any other aspect of the project. I know that Mr. Ahern pointed out or referenced in his presentation that as a result of working with the neighborhood, there's been a lot of neighborhood support. The chair will read the letters. I'm sure you'll hear them if you haven't already read them. But it's not just my client that feels that this is a good program for this lot and for this property, but we think it's the neighborhood and those who historically have been involved and been touched and concerned with this house that will be saved. Happy to take questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Is there anyone in the audience or on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please raise your hand if you're here, or indicate on the screen so that Sarah can introduce you into the meeting.
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor of the application.
Okay, so I will now read the correspondence. First of all is a memo. The memo is from Judith Giorgio, the Board of Health agent here in Chatham. She writes on 2/9, I have reviewed the plan to demo and rebuild the dwelling at this property and relocate the historic house portion. The proposed plan will require an upgrade to the septic system for the increased septic flow and encroachment onto the existing system. The lot size of 51,343 upland allows for the 5 bedrooms proposed at the property. Plans for the septic system must be reviewed and permits issued by the Health Division prior to construction. Then we have an email. This is from Michelle Clark to Sarah Clark. She writes on, January 26th, the applicant was before the Historical Commission on September 7th, 2021, proposing to relocate and preserve the original portion of the existing structure on the site. Demolition of the one-story addition on the rear of the existing dwelling that is not part of the original structure was proposed as part of the relocation and preservation plan. After reviewing the information and materials presented, the commission determined that the structure is historically significant, but that the proposed modifications would not negatively affect its historic integrity and therefore did not impose a demolition delay. Then we have a note. This is from Ellen Briggs, who's the founder of Protect Our Past. She writes on February 9th, Protect Our Past is in full support of Meg McCarthy's current proposal for the 19 Old Wharf Road property. The original house, Spindrift, is a stellar example of a structure that exemplifies the historic charm of Chatham, a trait that attracts visitors from all over this country and beyond. The plan to move it closer to Old Harbor Road will offer greater visibility to those driving by. Meg McCarthy has restored a notable historic property in the past. She deserves to be given this chance to do so again, thereby setting an example of how and why restorations enhance the historic fabric of Chatham. Please give her the green light to proceed as she plans. Then we have a letter. This is from Robert and Priscilla Oliver. Their address is 627 Old Harbor Road. They write on February 4th, we are the owners of an 18th century house and property located in proximity to that of the subject property. Over the years, we have witnessed the demolition of many historic structures to make way for construction, which we view as not being in harmony with the existing streetscapes and neighborhoods. It seems to us that this application represents a reasonable compromise to preserve a portion of the historic structure and allow construction of a new residence. In our judgment, the property owner has employed a most qualified architect and builder. This has resulted in a design and proposed site plan which should be consistent with the streetscape and neighborhood while complementing the existing historic structure. For these reasons, we respectfully request that you approve the application. Then we have an email. This is from Bonnie Rosenthal, and she lists North Chatham as her address. She writes on February 4th, we are writing to show our support of issuing a variance for Meg McCarthy's new build project at 19 Old Wharf Road. We're very pleased that they are planning to preserve the antique portion of the original house, and their new plan appears to complement our neighborhood nicely. Over her years in Chatham, Meg has taken great care in keeping her homes tasteful and beautifully maintained. We have no doubt that she will continue this tradition. Thank you for your consideration. That's Philip and Bonnie Rosenthal. Their address is 7 Old Harbor Lane. Then we have, looks like an email. This is from Phyllis Nickerson Power. She writes on February 3rd, I'm writing in support of the McCarthy's application. As a previous neighbor growing up across the street at 741 Old Harbor Road, I have a very strong opinion that this classic antique should be saved and preserved. My entire lifetime, the prior owners, the Cummings family, did much to maintain the character and architectural detail of this home. They used the wood burning fireplaces regularly, maintained the original wide pine floors, and all the original details. Somehow they managed year-round to raise a family year-round there and produce wonderful Christmas parties from the little kitchen. They were washer-shores from New Jersey in the late 1940s and did not try to change the character of the house. The McCarthys also wholeheartedly appreciate the value of maintaining Cape Cod historic homes, which I applaud. This site overlooking the harbor and ocean is unique and has been an iconic view as you approach the end of Old Harbor Road at the corner of Old Wharf Road. I attached photos of this home taken in 1950 by my father, Willard Nickerson, from our viewpoint at 741 Old Harbor Road. The town is losing far too many historic homes at an alarming rate, changing the character of true Cape Cod that we natives have so admired and enjoyed for centuries. As a member of the Nickerson Family Association, past board member of the NFA and Historical Society, and chairman of building project for the Genealogical Library building on Orleans Road in Chatham Port, I am fervently in support of this application to save this historic home sincerely. And I won't pass around the pictures, but they're very good. Okay. Anybody wants to see them, I'll pass them around later on. And we have an email. This is from Bruce Cummings. He writes on February 3rd, "Thank you for hearing me. Although I no longer live in Chatham, I lived in this house until I was 30 and moved to places beyond. But I always visit my own neighborhood, my childhood friends who still live nearby, and I relish my childhood growing up in such a wonderful part of this country. When I heard my home was purchased by a woman who wished to keep the house, I was thrilled. It's a wonderful old Cape home, which was owned by a sea captain in its very early years. The wood planks are some of the widest you'll ever see, and my family always kept it as original as it comes. There is still no heat upstairs where I would sleep, and to this day I attribute my good health to having to endure the wet, cold winter days going to bed and waking up to that bone-chilling cold. Please allow this new owner to keep the home, and I so hope it can be moved, as it is a treasure and should never be torn down. It is Chatham at its best, and you should always preserve your history. Thank you for listening and keeping our history alive." Email, this is from Nick Nickerson, 394 Stony Hill Road. Writes on February 3rd, "I've been a lifelong resident of North Chatham, growing up at 741 Old Harbor. I've also been the caretaker of this home for many years for the previous owners, the Cummings family. I know how much attention they paid to maintaining the character and historic details. I find it sad and disturbing to see how many new people feel it necessary to knock down and replace history and antique homes. I am in favor of the McCarthy application to save this historic home. I am encouraged to see people who appreciate the value of North Chatham history." Then we have a letter. This is from Steve Nickerson. And he writes on, well, it was received on January 29th. He writes, "Having seen the proposed plans for 19, I, as a lifetime quote-unquote Old Harbor resident who is related to the original owners and a direct descendant of the owners during the early 1900 period, fully support this project. I've always considered this building and its history an icon of the neighborhood. I feel extremely fortunate that someone is willing to save this antique and make it part of such an impressive project, which will enhance the neighborhood and allow this building to hopefully exist for another 200 years. My hope is that you and the board members will feel the same way and fully support this project." Then we have an email dated January 24th from Tony and Kathy Abu. They write, "My wife and I are located at 40 Old Wharf Road, and our driveway entrance is opposite the south side of the applicant's property line. We, like other abutters, have been given very nicely detailed renderings of the new structure, along with the original structure tastefully incorporated into the new scheme. We would like to say we are truly excited about the new project and how it will impact our neighborhood. It is a sizable and pivotal parcel, which is certainly deserving of a home that has been designed by people who possess the talent and expertise to do this site justice. We hope the board will aid the applicant's efforts to create such a thoughtful and tasteful new home. We are absolutely fine in the additional 1.5% of ground coverage." Another email, this is dated January 29th. This is from Russell and Jennifer Herndon, 18 Old Wharf Road. They say, "I'm writing in support of the allowing the dimensional variance. Upon living directly across the street, we are very interested in how the property will be developed. We have reviewed the plans for the property and believe that they will provide a welcome addition to our neighborhood while maintaining its charm. Thank you for your time and consideration." An email from Jennifer Campbell on January 31st. She's at 700 Old Harbor Road. She and actually, it's Jeffrey and Laurie Campbell, 700 Old Harbor Road. "We offer our full support for the project proposed by 19 Old Wharf Road Nominee Trust. Please contact if you have any questions." Then, this is a letter from William Storff. He's at 326 Morris Island Road. He writes on January 31st, and actually wrote this to me, "Dave, I'm writing in support of Ms. McCarthy and her husband, Mr. Capel's application before your committee, seeking a modest increase in allowable lot coverage on their new home to be built at 19. My interest is twofold. As people who have valued and endeavored to support historic architecture for over 30 years in our town, and also a belief that their approach is an exemplary model to be followed in the future. If we look at the Bow Roof home on Pond Street, which they restored, or the saving and conversion of the old bicycle shop on the corner of Old Harbor and Depot, we see beautiful artisan work which enhance the respective neighborhoods. Then consider the immaculate maintenance and improvements of the 215-year-old Red Tavern on Old Wharf, where they followed in the footsteps of Bill and Sharon Gould. For 15 years, they have been superb stewards of an iconic building, retaining architectural integrity while bringing the home up to today's standards. Now they have embarked on an adventure, building a new home using a nationally renowned architect, noticed for meticulously preserving and blending the old with the new. Particularly important in this specific instance, they will be preserving a home that was built in 1800, not as a shed, but designed right into their everyday living after renovation. When we consider the growing voices of town citizens wanting to retain historical integrity wherever possible throughout the town, this project exemplifies the best path forward. Thanks for listening. Hope you agree. Then an email from Ron Hurl. Ron's at 709 Old Harbor Road. He writes on January 31st, I'd like to give my full support. I have known the applicants for many years as wonderful and caring neighbors who play by the rules. Respectfully submitted, Ron Hurl. And that, unless there's anything extra, Sarah, is the correspondence. I would now ask for anyone, either here in the audience or in Microsoft Teams, who wishes to either, number one, speak against this application, or number two, that might have a specific question to ask that. Now is the time where you can raise your hand here or on Microsoft Teams, if you would show Sarah your little hand, and we can bring you into the meeting.
There is no one that wishes to speak in opposition or has a specific question.
Okay, so we'll now go on to questions from the board. And let's start with Dave Veach.
Thanks, Dave. The only questions that I have in thinking about this, in part of what was mentioned, and I don't know, Mike or Sarah, you may be able to weigh in on this. When we grant variances, or in the granting of variances, how is further proposals to a property down the road, a few years or 10 years or whatever, how are those treated? Are there things that might be allowed by special permit, or does everything have to go back because of a variance and go back to the original variance and work off of that, or some other situation?
My experience, if I may, yeah, sure. Variances can be conditioned by statute, the same way special permits can be conditioned. In other words, the board could put a condition in itself that any change to the building and so forth would need further Board of Appeals approval. However, the one thing that you can't condition is continued ownership of the property in a variance. Well, you could do that in a special permit. It's not often done, but a variance, a special permit can be conditioned in that way. That said, I think anything, if you went and applied to the building department for maintenance on this or something, it would be fine. But obviously, any addition would obviously have to come back to the Board of Appeals. And so I think what I've suggested to boards when I've been on the other side wearing my town council hat, if they want to freeze a particular proposal in time, is they grant it per plan and put a condition in that if there are going to be any changes, you've got to return to the Board of Appeals. And that's probably the best way that a board could protect itself in that regard.
Okay, and because you suggested that possibly we might want to consider a condition with respect to not having a bedroom in the old house or not. That's an example of a condition
It is.
we might
Absolutely.
think of applying in this case. Okay.
That's correct.
And, yeah, other than that, I think you've answered other questions that I've had, so that's it. Thanks. That takes care of me for now, Dave.
I
Thanks.
was asking Sarah for a little bit of clarification in
Yeah.
my own mind about, okay, is that a modification of a variance or a modification, or is it a special permit? And it could be any of these things.
Yeah.
There's no answer, correct? Yeah. All right. Buck, questions?
Well, Mr. Ford, in one of the letters, no, or it wasn't a letter, it was I guess it was a letter from the Historical Society. There was reference to a demolition delay, and it might have been to the L, but not to the house. Can you, they did apply for a demolition delay. Can you elaborate on how that,
Yes.
I just caught the statement in the letter, and I was a little concerned about.
Okay. So because of the age of this particular structure, no portion of it could be demolished, or, although the barn isn't old enough, the barn could have been demolished. But the main house with the L on the back could not be demolished without going through the Historic Commission and applying for a demolition permit. So we applied for a demolition permit, but having met with representatives of the commission ahead of time and neighbors, when we went in on the applicant's behalf, Ms. McCarthy's behalf, our proposal was not to demolish the whole house, but simply to demolish the L on the back, which we found in our research was not part of the original house, as we showed you in the pictures. So in order to remove the L, we needed the permission of the Historic Commission, who could have said, well, we don't want you to remove the L, and we're going to put a delay of 18 months on any demolition of any part of the project. But they liked the proposal that the main house be picked up and moved on the site and kept on this site. They thought that was important. And in so doing, they made that part of their approval to waive any demolition delay that they could have imposed. So the consideration for the demolition delay being waived was that the original 1803 house be saved, picked up, moved over in the location that's shown on the site plan, and to be renovated in keeping with the original house. And that was the process at Historic.
And I'll read again for you, Buck, the last sentence from Michelle Clark. After reviewing the information and materials presented, the commission determined that the structure is historically significant, but that the proposed modifications would not negatively affect its historical integrity, and therefore did not impose a demolition delay. So it was the commission that made up their mind.
So I have a follow-up question. So my concern is, when we're looking at the three criteria, and you've made an excellent presentation on how the house is crying out for preservation. I believe that was your words, and certainly the letters and the Historic Commission. If the variance wasn't approved, they could apply for a demolition delay for the antique house, the Caleb Nickerson house, built in 1803, and the Historic Commission and many citizens, especially the Nickerson family and all the people who live up there, would be very upset. The fact is, the Historic Commission, the strongest thing they can do is postpone the demolition for 18 months. But at that time, they would then be able to remove the house and go ahead with a special permit for their new proposed house, which is 9.7 coverage. Is that correct?
It's correct, except for the last statement. If the historic house is not part of this plan, this is an as-of-right house. There's no zoning board approval whatsoever. By agreeing to try and save this old house, Ms. McCarthy put herself under the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals, not just for a special permit, but for a variance. And she knew that. I advised her. We talked about it and talked about what it was. So she knew that that was going to invoke Board of Appeals jurisdiction. But without that, she just builds this house. She doesn't have to come to the Board of Appeals. She can build the house.
Wow. Thank you. No more questions.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, good evening. Okay, so just in terms of timing of all this, the owner initially was planning to demolish the house and asked for that to the Historic Society?
No, when her first thought was, yeah, I want to go in and just build my new house, but
Right.
didn't apply for that because we met with some of the members of the Historic Commission, we did site visits. It became evident
It became evident.
that there was a lot of groundswell support to save the 1803 house.
But she had already had the plans that you're talking about done by Mr. Ahern? before-
Yeah, see, that-
Before she realized she wanted to preserve the old house?
The timing was, all that was happening at once.
Okay, because it sounds a little odd that she already had these plans that were incorporating this historic house before she had decided to keep it.
No, I think all that was going on at once.
Do you know what I mean, though?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when the initial plans were put together, my understanding, by the architect, the only site plan that was available at that time was a 98 site plan. And the 98 site plan showed a different floodplain, elevation 10.
Yeah.
And so I think there was probably, they thought they had more room than when you apply the 15-foot, which is the result of the current survey, that implicated it as well.
But I'm still going back to that whole spiel, which I thought was a great presentation by Mr. Ahern. I mean, I'd hire him in a heartbeat. He's very passionate. I love the whole design. But it just kind of seems weird to me that that was all designed before she decided to keep
If
that
you
other
know-
house that was
yeah.
trying to be.
Yeah.
Could I
I don't
speak
get
to
that.
Maybe Mr. Ahern could address that, because he's the one who was, and the timing issue as well. Could I?
Yes.
Could I,
So,
Mr. Ahern?
yes, please. Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So when we developed the design of the house, it was always to incorporate the antique house as it was approved by the Historic District Commission. When we were using the site plan that we had to work from, we had the 58,871 square foot lot. And that with that, we didn't have any issues with a potential variance. It was only after we found out that with the updated survey, that the upland dimension changed and the elevation from 10 to 15 came into play, that we are before you today. But the intent from day one was always to preserve the antique house portion that we have been able to maintain, not the wing at the back, and to locate the house as part of the overall ensemble. So that's always been what we wanted to do from day one.
Okay, because
that-
that makes much more sense. And then the
I
other-
wasn't necessarily involved in that timing, so that's why I deferred to him.
And given how talented Mr. Ahern is, how much of a real hardship is it to just make it a little bit smaller? I know that seems like an obvious, it's the elephant walking right through the room. Why can't you just make it a little smaller?
Yeah. And could the house be reduced? It could. So I guess the question is, if somebody has a house designed, it meets the lot coverage, it's allowed as of right, doesn't have to come to the Board of Appeals, 9.7%, and they're asked to save a house, an historic house, which, if you save it, it triggers the jurisdiction of this board. And so the applicant was advised of that and took that on, knowing that she would have to come and make this pitch before this board. And as Buck asked, you know, if that doesn't happen, well, there are other options and the property will get developed. So, but that's, you know, that's the answer to that.
Right. Attorney Ford, could I comment further on that, please?
With the chair's permission, I don't
Yes.
run the meeting, he does.
Yes, certainly.
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I understand the question, but the issue is, and I touched on it briefly in my presentation, is that it's about the land coverage. And we specifically wanted to have a house that felt that it had been added on over a long period of time. The idea of the barn and the porches and the low one-story wings, in order to create the ensemble and the storyline that I shared with you, required a bigger footprint, if you will. If we need to go back and redesign the house to comply with the 723 square feet of less footprint, the house is going to go up in tall and volume and height, which is really the antithesis of what we're trying to do from its inception. We really wanted this to be an antique cape-looking house with some one-story wings. But in order to get the program that would comply with that 730 square foot delta, we would need to shrink the footprint, and then we in fact would have to pick it up on the second floor, which would change the whole character, the volume and scale, and I would argue be against the character and scale and volume of the neighborhood. And it would be recognized as a house of today's time, not of the past. So I think for all the letters of support from the neighborhood and about the design that's been shared with them, I think they clearly get it. They understand that this is not a house of 2022, but really is the implied historical house that could have been there, that was part of the bigger Nickerson ensemble when they might have had the barn instead of the garage that was later built. So I think they definitely understand the importance of scale and volume and keeping it low and keeping it in a Cape Cod vernacular, as opposed to shrinking the footprint and then using that same required square footage to go up on the second floor. So hopefully that gives you some further clarification.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Paul?
I had somewhat the same question that Randy had. One of the issues, maybe Mr. Ford should address this, but one of the issues in dealing with a variance is you can't have a hardship which is self-created. And the issue is, are you self-creating a hardship here by requiring that the main house be the size that it is in terms of its footprint? In other words, is it not possible to make up your 1.5% by modifying the main house design without going up and simply continuing on your low-level development? I don't know whether that's Mike's.
Yeah, well, let me take a stab at it, if I might, Mr. Chairman. So, and I, recognizing that self.
Mike, please no talking away from
Can
the.
I pass these to somebody?
Yeah, do that, and then go back to the mic, right. Thank you.
So while those are being passed around, understanding that self-created hardship always comes up in a variance hearing, I went back and read every self-created hardship case I could find that was reported in the Commonwealth. And I have to tell you that in reading all of those cases, I couldn't find any case that was anywhere close to the facts that we have here. Now, one of the principles I found in the case of Adams v. Broley on self-created hardship that the court stated, and they upheld a variance in that case, was that the board granted relief to Broley because the triggering event of hardship occurred through no fault or subterfuge of the owner. So I said to myself, gee, I think that has application here. Why? I don't believe that it's the applicant's fault that she needed to apply for a variance. The applicant took on something, saving this house, recognizing the importance that it had to the Historic Commission, the neighborhood, and the greater town. Most of the cases that I read under self-created hardship were somebody has a 5-acre parcel, they end up subdividing it into 4 lots, They sell off 3, the 4th lot happened to be a little bit smaller, they go in and ask for a variance, and the courts have consistently said, you can't come in here having created the hardship by forming the lot and then looking for a variance on it. There is no condition here that Ms. McCarthy created. If you want to say, well, she created it because she had Mr. Ahern design a compatible house at 9.7%, which is complying, and then took on trying to save an historic house, which took her over. If you want to find that's a self-created hardship, frankly, I think that's a big stretch, given the cases that I've read. So I think that you can find, in this case, that the hardship is not self-created. The hardship is one she took on her own. It was voluntary, but it was for a public purpose. And that was to save the building, save the structure at considerable expense. The expense is in 7 figures. I went through it with her today. I don't think we need to get into all of the numbers, but it was a considerable expense to take that on. And rather than say, you know what, let's just get the demolition delay, 18 months, I'll build my 9.7, and I don't have to go to any board, and we'll do something else for living quarters for 18 months. But she said no, even though I told her that we were going to have to come to the board and go through this. So I would suggest to you that there are cases. Now, the other thing that's on that handout that I want the board to be aware of, that there are 2 recognized mass cases. One's an SJC case, the Marsland versus Zoning Board of Newburyport, that specifically says that despite the stringency of the hardship requirement generally, where only a dimensional variance is involved, even a relatively minor hardship can justify the variance. So what is the hardship here? That Ms. McCarthy took on, having designed a complying house, took on saving the historic structure. That's really what we're talking about here. And I don't see that as being a self-created hardship.
Okay, thank you. Let me address Mr. Ahern then. In terms of making the preservation of the older house a part of your renovation of a new house, is it not possible to do that without elevating? Can you not do that with a longer footprint that would still be compliant?
Well, based on our program of what we're trying to achieve, and as most of you know, for those of you who know Meg and her husband, they are avid classic car collectors. And it was really quite important that the barn house some of their cars that are very precious to them, and that the existing house and its square footage would really take away potentially the ability to have the barn as one solution, which really is not what the McCarthy Meg wants to do. And secondly, I mean, the house itself is a 4-bedroom house with a first floor master bedroom. And based on us aging baby boomers, although I'm older than Meg, was really important. And so that affects footprint, as opposed to putting the bedroom up on a 2nd floor, which, as I suggested, would impact the volume and character and scale of the architecture from the public view. Because basically they have their master bedroom, dressing room and bathroom, and then their living room and their kitchen and dining area and library on the 1st floor, and a very modest second bedroom guest room. And then coupled with the requirements of the classic car barn, that's what's driving the bus on the footprint. And so for them to do this project and to preserve the antique house as part of the project, they really need to have basically a 1-floor living house for their needs. And because of that, that really creates the scalability of the footprint in question.
Okay, I guess that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. You're going to be really very happy. I have no questions of you.
I hope that makes me happy.
To both of you gentlemen, what is the square footage of the classic car barn?
I would defer to Mr. Ahern,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. It is 22 feet in depth, and the effective area of the floor area for the cars is about 46 foot 10.
So 47 by 22, is that what I heard?
That's what I
Well, the
heard,
interior dimension is 47 by 21.
21.
That's the interior dimension, so where you
Okay.
could actually park the car.
But what does it take up out of the footprint? It's a little bigger than that, isn't it?
Well, the footprint is 22 by 5110.
Okay, so Sarah just figured it out. It's 1,034 square feet. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Oh, any other questions from anyone? Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Could I
That
make,
needs a vote. Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Veach votes
And I
yes.
vote yes. Okay, deliberations, let's start with Buck.
The presentation, I thought the presentation was exceptional. The architect design was fabulous and all that, but we're asked to consider this based on three things, and those three things. The letters were unbelievable. They weren't written by one person and signed by 11 neighbors. There was a lot of thought that went into those letters. It's obvious that the Caleb Nickerson house is a very important house to the Nickerson family, to North Chatham. Nobody mentioned that there's a post office up there on the water side of Old Wharf, and the Red Tavern that was built about the same time. So that was like a little colony up there. This building represents so much to the old-time Chatham. And the applicant's representative, or the architect, mentioned some of the construction of the newer homes in the neighborhood. And when I look at the two, I have to say I'm very much in favor of this historic preservation, of the concept of the two together, the old original house. It's so important. And my question to the applicant's representative got to the heart of the matter. If we don't approve this, I don't know too many people that would have a heart big enough to say, I'm going to shrink my house because, in order to make this work. I think the more obvious, most people, after they've gone overboard and to the expense, asking the town, I'm willing to do this for 7 figures, and it doesn't work, that'd be a hard pill for me to swallow. So I'm supporting it.
Randy?
Okay. So I think that as far as the prong of the purpose and intent of the bylaw, I think you even have a better argument. If you look at general provisions, purpose and intent, you have 2 prongs on this purpose and intent of the bylaw for you. Preservation of the value of land and buildings, and you also have preservation for the citizens for the right and the customary means women. All right. Preservation for present and future inhabitants of Chatham of the natural, architectural, and historic assets of the community. So you have the historic intent, and so it's not a derogation of the bylaw at all. You have that square. And you also have the fact that there's a piece of property, you know, as far as the prong number one, the building. But I was struggling a lot with the idea of a hardship, but I think you have a toehold on that based on Di Giovanni, that case that you gave us, you have a toehold. So if I were voting, I'd support it.
Paul?
Yes, I think that the explanation and the presentations, both by the architect and by Mr. Ford, have been excellent, and they frame the issues for us very well. We've been struggling over the past, or I've been struggling at least over the past couple of months with the concept of to what extent do we bend the concepts under the law with respect to variance in order to accomplish an overall goal which may include historic preservation and things of that nature, which are not technically under our purview with respect to standards for variance. The big difficulty I had with this initially was the fact that it seemed to me that it was certainly possible for the applicant to reduce the size of the house itself and incorporate the antique aspect of the 1803 house and do that within a footprint that would comply. So that created the question of self-created hardship. I'm still struggling with the question of whether it is in fact self-created or not self-created. I realize that Ms. McCarthy has taken on an obligation that perhaps she doesn't have to undertake. But at the same time, from a hardship viewpoint, from a variance, it seems to me it's still somewhat of a self-created hardship. So I'm still struggling with those two issues.
Dave?
Thank you very much. I would echo what everyone has said, particularly Buck, Mr. Upson. I like the idea of saving, of course I like the idea of saving the old and working the new in. It is so important that we save some of these homes for our children and our grandchildren. I think you're doing a great job of that. I have been in that house. I was a friend of Bruce Cummings. It's going to look nice. Mr. Hearn has done a wonderful job of designing a beautiful home. It's going to be in keeping with the neighborhood, definitely in keeping with the neighborhood. There is no question, I will vote yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave. Well, I'm 100% in favor of this. I think the presentation was excellent, and I think it's given us very good reasons why we can find that this meets all of the criteria and that we can support it. I was going to ask a question, and I thought, well, I didn't really want to get into this, but I just want to go through a little bit some of what went through my mind with respect to maybe some of the questions about timing and the saving of the old house versus finding out that, no, they'd have to get a variance. Well, maybe they could incorporate the existing structure into the plan and achieve the, meeting the current ground lot coverage requirement. And I thought a little bit further about that, and I should be more aware, but I'm not so much aware of. There are you can get some kinds of breaks and advantages in the building code in preserving existing structures and older structures, and that is that's one thing to apply, but absolutely to pick this building up, move it onto the new location, take the L off of it, that can be done in such a way that that is going to make it much more likely and easier to preserve the structure and the interior portions of it and things, and meet current codes where necessary and get relief where not. If you were to say to the applicant, no, or if we were trying to say, no, we want you to, you can move it, but we want you to incorporate, save that house by incorporating it into the new structure. By the time that's all said and done, you might have some, there was something that Patrick said, that it would not look like the old house that was then. It would look like new construction. You may even have saved some of it. You may have windows that look the same, but it will not, and nor will it feel that way when you walk into it and try to do, have it be adaptive reuse. So I understand that Paul is wrestling a little bit with this question of hardship and things. To me, there's no question that this is a better way, if we're going to preserve this old house, which I definitely agree with, I think we should do, this is the best way to do it. And so I don't think there's any, I don't think there's any enough gain to trying to say to them, no, you need to work with the lot coverage as was amended by the increase in the Conservancy District. I think that it's far better for us to grant the variance in this case, because I think it's going to achieve everything that needs to be achieved, and I'm grateful that that they've put together this package and this presentation, and they've made it far easier for us to grant the variance. Thanks.
Well, I don't like to be the odd man out, but I guess I am. I can't see how the argument can be made that this is not self-generated hardship. And, okay, let's just start with that. To me, it's the classic case of the needs versus wants. And the presentation was a little vague to me as to who came first. Did preservation of the old house come first, or did the new design come first? And that, I know, Mr. Ford, you said, well, it kind of ran together, it might happen at the same time and all that. Okay. But it seems to me like your applicant wanted a house like was designed by Mr. Hearn. And it turned out to be 9.7. And then somehow she got involved with saving the historic home. Well, okay, well, let's see how that can fit and all that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, it didn't fit. But she still has the wants for this big house. And when I asked this question about the square footage of the garage, or the whatever you want to call it, the barn, and I had not seen until today the view of that barn looking at those four doors. And to me, there's nothing really attractive about that. I mean, for whatever reason, it wasn't in my package. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's scale that back. Can we do it with 2 bays? And so what Mr. Hearn told me is that was 1,034 square feet. So if you take half of that, that's 500. And I'm sure that he could find another 200 square feet someplace to make this house a hair smaller because of that classic car garage. And don't forget, these folks have that beautiful structure on Depot to store their cars in if they want. I mean, that's why they did it. And that's neither here nor there. But the fact is, I don't think that's a hardship for them at all. I think this is a need. No, it's a want. That's what they want to do, and they now want to also save that old house. Great. But as far as granting a variance to do it, I don't believe that I could vote in good conscience for it. It just seems to me to be trying to change what we do as far as our criteria and making it work in this case. And so I'll be voting no.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman, on
Sure.
on what you just said? Thank you. I appreciate that's obviously at your discretion. I think the message, if you find that taking on this historic house after the 9.7 is designed, and I would agree with you, that's what they want for a plan. That's what they came up with, that's the plan they want. But I think the message you're sending is this. Okay, this is the program that we want. We can do it as of right under the zoning bylaw. We don't have to go to any boards. We can build it. We've got to deal with the demolition delay, yes. In the course of that, they get this request. And so they're now being told, if we follow your reasoning, that if they take on preserving the house, don't do that. That's a self-created hardship. Because that's going to put you over the building coverage. So if you want to save the historic house, you're going to have to go and redo what your plan is. And so they took it on, recognizing they had to come here and come through this particular process, and that it's discretionary with your board. So I understand your reasoning. I'm just trying to get the reasoning from this side. I don't think that it's a bright line self-created hardship. I think there is some discretion here that you could look at the facts in this case. It's a very unique situation, and it's driven by unique circumstances on this lot. This Caleb Nickerson house isn't everywhere, but it's here. So
Well, and
I hear what you're saying, but I think that's the message you're sending, is that if you otherwise have a conforming house and you want to save something that takes you over, don't do it, because it's a self-created hardship if you come to the Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals.
well, I think I've kind of twisted what I said, because if we're going back to the want, if you want to save the house, great. But if you want to build a house you want, maybe you have to back off a bit. So I don't see why both can't be accomplished, frankly, without having Mr. Ahern go up to and increase the second floor and all those other things. It's simply, to me, so, anyway.
Understood.
Okay, but thank
you.
you for your wisdom, Mr. Ford. So, we need a motion, Paul, please?
I'll move to approve the application as submitted. I don't think we need to deal with conditions at this point.
No.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so this is a vote. You say yes or no. Buck?
Buck says yes.
Paul?
Paul is persuaded in part by what Mr. Nixon has to say and in part by what Mr. Veach has to say, because I think what Mr. Veach is saying, based on his experience, is it's not possible to incorporate the old house into the new house and have it appear as it should appear, which to me would be significant. At the same time, it may well be possible to reduce the size of the existing proposal and keep the old house separate the way it is now and comply. It's correct that we've previously approved storage for vehicles in town for the same kind of vehicle storage, as I understand it, as what's proposed here. The renovations that are going to be made to the old house are substantial. There's going to be a kitchen, bathroom, and so forth. So I think at this point, my vote would be a no, based on the fact that the hardship is, no matter how you look at it, self-created in order to accomplish a house which is the size that they want it to be. And from our viewpoint, I think that does not satisfy the criteria for a variance.
Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Thompson's going to vote yes, And I'm very sorry that, about what's probably going to happen, which is another house, another old home is going to be destroyed. I'm very sorry about that, but I'm voting yes.
Mr. Veach?
And as I indicated before, I vote yes.
Okay. And I vote no.
Thank you for your consideration.
So that fails to pass. 3 yes votes, 2 no votes. As I mentioned earlier, to be successful, you need 4 yes votes. Gentlemen, we will take a 5-minute break. Folks in Studio 18.
107 Pinkham Road, Sandwich, Mass. 02563. Owners of property located at 4 Nickerson Circle, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessors Map 4D, Block 3, Lot D1. The applicant seeks a variance under Section 8D2C from the requirements of Appendix 2 that a lot have 60,000 square feet of land area in the R60 zoning district in order to be compliant. The lot contains 34,205 square feet in an R20/R60 zoning district. A dimensional variance is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 10, and Section 8D2C of the Chatham Protective Bylaw.
Mr. Riley, and how are you, sir?
Well, I'm well-educated, I can tell you that.
Would you like to introduce your friends?
Yes, I shall. This is Tim McElroy. He's one of the partners in Bratt Ventures, and Lindsay Weiss, who is, she and her husband are the other partners in Bratt Ventures.
Floor is yours.
And they introduced them. So they purchased 2 properties there in South Chatham. One had a old wrecked house on it that was, had there been a fire there, or was that just in tough shape? It was just abandoned. It was just an abandoned house, which, they've reconstructed and sold. And in the Small World Department, prior to purchasing these properties, they asked me if, in my opinion, this lot we're dealing with today was a buildable lot. And I said, well, I'd looked at the zoning bylaw and the ownership of the lots, which had been always maintained in separate ownership. And I knew that the lot qualified under the Board of Health regulations. I couldn't represent them. I represented the seller on another matter. So the actual acquisition was supervised by, their regular lawyer. And so this property, they applied for a building permit. They'd been told the building permit had previously been issued, and one had been. The property owner had not gone forward with the construction, so that building permit was recalled. And then when these folks applied for a building permit, there was no, as far as I can tell, speaking with Sarah today and with Jay Briggs, there was no official opinion. They were told, or their agent was told, the lot's not buildable. And so they filed this application really without more. In other words, no statement from the building commissioner, this lot is not buildable because. Right, so, and this is filed by Tim here, and they did a very thorough job on researching things. But after speaking with Sarah and the building commissioner today, and looking at the section of the bylaw that I believe was the basis for the denial at this point. Do you have that section, Sarah? There you go. So this section was added in 1996. And so I was speaking with Dave Clark about this matter, and it was his recollection, which I concurred with once he brought it to my attention, that this amendment was brought forward by Jack Farrell, who used to practice law here in town and did a lot of zoning work. Now he's a real estate broker, and he's just clipping coupons and living off the fat of the land. So so I called Jack today to talk to him about about this amendment, and he said that it arose out of the fact that there were, the Avalon Point subdivision had been done by the Laffey family, and they were about to, either they had run out of protection under the bylaw and the subdivision control law at that time, or they were about to. So Jack, working with the planning department, fashioned this amendment that would extend and preserve the subdivision, which was a 8 or 9 lot subdivision. It had the salutary benefit of also assisting Sam Stribert's subdivision there where Agway is, Linden Tree Lane. They had also done it. And the rationale that Jack used at the town meeting was that, we have a lot of protective language in our bylaw to protect pre-existing lots from being made unbuildable. That shows, the town in general doesn't think people should be penalized for not developing their property. In fact, there's some basis for encouraging delays in development. In any event, so this bylaw was passed. So the question that occurred to me today after speaking with Sarah and Jay Briggs is, does this bylaw really apply to this situation? What we have here is a single lot. It's called a subdivision because under our bylaw, when you have a panhandle lot, the panhandle has to be approved by the planning board. And when you need approval, then you can't have an approval not required plan. An approval not required plan is not a subdivision, it's just a division. So by sort of a quirk of the circumstance, the creation of this lot was technically a subdivision. But was it a subdivision within the meaning of a section that requires construction of roads? Well, we don't have a road. All we have is a driveway. And while it's true there was to be some drainage done in the driveway, I would suggest that if we had started our application from that point of view, perhaps the question before you would be, well, we don't know what the question would be because we don't know what the building commissioner would say to that question. So if the building commissioner said, well, I think you're right, I don't think this does apply to your circumstance, well, then we wouldn't be here at all. If the building commissioner said, well, technically a subdivision, I'm a by-the-book guy, which Jay is, so I think that it does apply, then we could come to you and ask you whether you agree with the building commissioner's opinion or not. So the we have a lot of history. Lindsay would like to educate the members about some of the history here, but I wonder if I could get some feedback on on the issues that I've raised.
So are you essentially saying that you'd scrap the variance request and go on to another meeting where you would bring up, does the board agree with the building commissioner or not? Is that the next step you want to go to?
Well, we don't really know what the building commissioner is going to say. I think what he said up till now, but I don't think anybody presented him with the question I have for him, which is, this section was designed to deal with multiple lot subdivisions that have subdivision roads. This is not that circumstance. So does this bylaw apply to this particular lot? Because technically, it's a subdivision because we needed approval for the panhandle driveway.
So don't you need that answer first before you go on to the next step?
Well, we do, but I'd like to get, I mean, I know that if, I know that with the petition before you, you don't have the authority to answer that question.
Right.
But I would like to know,
Well, so the question is, would we like to have a discussion with you when the building commissioner has an opportunity to weigh in and give us his reasoning for this, that, and the other thing? Because none of us could answer that question now, certainly.
right.
So that's what you want to know? Okay.
Well-
So I'm going to ask,
No,
okay?
yeah, that's
Yep.
what I want to know.
So I'll ask everybody, do you think we should encourage Mr. Riley to withdraw the variance request, and then we'll see him again when he would come to challenge the building commissioner's decision, because we, as a board, have the ability to override that if we wished. And I think that's what we're dealing with here. Am I right? Did I say it right?
Yeah,
Okay.
basically,
All
yeah.
right. So, Buck, how do you weigh on this?
Buck thinks Bill made a great argument, and I think he should ask for a continuance.
And then we would go on to the next step, which would be...
Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is. Okay. Randy?
Yeah, ask for a continuance.
Or withdrawal.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
She said,
Ask for a continuance, is my opinion.
Yeah, I think it certainly makes sense to get the input, and then you can either be appealing a decision by the zoning officer under that provision, or I suppose coming before us to continue with a variance. I guess the real question is, does that mean that you want to put the variance on a continuation basis, or do you want to withdraw that and come back with either the variance or an appeal of the
Well, well,
building commissioner?
what I'd like to do in that regard is ask Sarah, because we would clearly need to re-advertise and modify our application and re-advertise. We'd like to leave the variance application there, continue that to whatever the re-advertisement date is, and submit the modified application to Sarah tomorrow so she can advertise it.
well, and as Sarah was just pointing out to me, what you need to do is submit something to the building commissioner so that he can turn it down, or not, and then that would spring you into saying, well, I challenge your decision, and I want to bring it in front of the zoning board of appeals.
Right, I'll do that tomorrow, and I'm hoping
Okay.
Jay can get right back to me on it.
Okay, so today you would like to ask for a continuance on the
Yes.
variance to, let's say, 3 months from now? I mean, I'm just picking a
Well, why
number
don't-
out of the
Can I
hat.
Why
ask
do
a
we-
question? I'm
Wait,
sorry.
wait,
I just have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
If we continued the conversation with asking for variance, and I'm very new to this, so I don't quite understand, but would that mean that if we were turned down today for a variance, we wouldn't be able to then go with this other option?
Well, that's correct.
Okay. So it's like a one-time deal.
Well, yeah. Yeah, but we drag it out over the years, as you can see, so.
And
And Mr. Riley's very good about dragging things out. over
Well,
the years.
So.
So.
I've learned a long time ago, there's many ways to get another bite at the apple.
That's right. All right. So the question in front of us is, will we continue the variance?
What I
To, when?
What I would propose would be 2 weeks, because then we can get a decision from Jay, and then we'd be in a position to, rather than just go out 3 months willy-nilly, then we could go to the next meeting, the earliest meeting it could be advertised for.
Yeah, because we're kind of full up 2 weeks from today, so.
Oh, I know that,
Yeah.
because.
I mean, in fact, I think the name Riley is on most of it anyway. So perhaps you'd like to withdraw all of those things that you have.
Yeah,
Then we can consider this.
then I'd have to go into the witness protection program for my clients if
All
I
right,
did
well,
that.
that's not so bad.
March 10th, I have 4, possibly 5.
Well, so we'd come back, on March 10th, presumably, before March 10th, we would be requesting a further continuance date. In other words, we wouldn't expect to have a hearing on March 10th. We just want to be able to keep the thing moving without going 3 months out, that's all.
Okay. All right. So is that all right with everybody?
I'm not sure I quite understand.
Okay.
Well, when does that ever come into play? Yes. Okay, so how about a motion, please, Paul?
I'll move to grant the request for a continuance to March 10th.
Second.
Voting?
Buck votes yes.
All?
All vote yes?
Dave Thompson definitely votes yes.
Dave Beach votes yes.
I vote yes. That's a unanimous vote.
Thank you very
And we're sorry you didn't have an opportunity to educate us, but I think you'll be getting an opportunity in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right? You probably prepared a lot of stuff, too. Sorry about that. Oh, all right, all right. All right, Sarah, let's go on to 22-004.
Application number 22-004, Flynn Family Realty Trust, care of Daniel Flynn, 56 Westview Drive, Woodstock, Connecticut, 06281. Owner of property located at 144 Indian Hill Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 8F, Block 12, Lot R31. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the construction of a covered porch and second-floor addition. The existing dwelling is non-conforming, and it is located 35 feet from the road. The proposed covered porch and second-floor addition will be non-conforming, and that they will be located 30 feet from the road where a 40-foot setback is required. The lot is non-conforming, and that it contains 28,700 square feet, where 60,000 square feet is required in the R60 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw.
Mr. Flynn, I presume, is that correct? Yes, that's me, yes. Well, please, step right up and just introduce yourself, and it's yours.
Daniel Flynn.
Okay.
From 144 Indian Hill
Okay.
Road. So I guess I'd just start with a quick history. We've been on Indian Hill Road about 15 years, I think. Very lucky to have kind of landed in that neighborhood, great neighbors. And we have a, as you've probably seen on the plans, very small cottage. We are looking to spend more time down here. We got one out of college and hoping the other one gets there too. So that's our plan. The cottage is, it seems very important to the neighborhood. It's, a lot of people knew the original owners. He was a scrimshaw in town here. His craftsmanship is throughout the house, and it's very well built. So we're trying to expand it, not a lot, but to also keep the same charm that it has. So I did notice that on the plans, it was kind of hard to see what we started with and what we're shooting for. So I have some pictures that I'd like to hand out just across here.
Okay.
To show what we're shooting for, and why the porch is very important with that look that we're trying to do. So we worked on plans. I went into the building office, and the commissioner had told me that we had to go this route because it's not new construction. He said if this was new construction that we wouldn't have to do this. We're looking to go to the original setback in the front, which is the only side we're non-conforming on, which is just the 5 feet. So the 5-foot porch gets us to the 30 feet in the front. I'll show you that here. Looks like it was. I think the 30 feet is, if you drive around the neighborhood, is pretty consistent in the neighborhood, 35 feet on many of the houses. We are set below the road quite a bit. It's quite a drop, so it also looks a little further back than it is. But when you measure on a straight line, it comes in a little tighter. Again, the way the bylaw, I guess, is applying is if, like I said, if this was new construction, as I read it and was told, we would not be here. So we're looking for relief from that, just to go to the 30 feet.
Oh, yeah.
And we do have a foundation in the backyard that we have applied for a building permit just to put, that was put in prior to us buying the property, that we're looking to put a barn up on that also. So moving, that's been existing, I think, for about 20 years. Moving back starts to encroach on that. So I've kind of gone back and forth in, you know, should I take it out, and talking to the building inspector and the costs of putting in a foundation like that, and I was swayed the other way, and we got to talk with him, and then we decided that we could definitely use it down here. So we'd like to finish that, and then the house would have the right distance in between, so.
When I looked down on it, I thought it was a garden.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know,
Well, it's, yeah.
It's
yeah.
a nice walled garden.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a- And
Yeah,
actually, yeah.
People have, you know, asked if it's a tennis court, and we just usually say yes, and, you know, but
Yeah.
it's time to do something with it. so.
Mr. Thompson had a angle on it for me, so Max, you can tell what you believe it was used for.
I think, excuse me, I think Forrest Bogue was getting ready to put a barn up there to work on trucks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
He's a tractor-trailer driver.
Yeah, I
over
have the
road.
plans that were submitted at the original time, and
Really?
that's what was, yeah, there. And, you know, so there was gonna be a driveway, I think, coming down. He was gonna come in and kind of go back into it, and so we're basically, we simplified it was more of a Cape-style garage. We just made the plans more look like a barn, and would just like to finish that. You know, that foundation meets the setbacks and all that, so. So,
Okay, and you're not here for that, so anyway.
Right, yeah,
Does anybody want to hear from Mr. Flynn, have him go through the criteria? I don't see anybody wants to have you do that, lucky you. So,
Very lucky.
have you finished your presentation?
I have.
Okay, very good. So I'll now ask if there's anybody in the audience, either here or on Microsoft Teams, who wishes to speak in favor of this, please indicate so we can introduce you into the meeting.
There is no one that wishes to speak in favor.
Okay, I'll read the correspondence. This is a memo from Judith Giorgio, Board of Health, on 2/8. She writes, "I've reviewed the plan to add an addition to this property. There will be no increase in septic flow. The addition will not encroach on the existing septic system. I have no concerns." Then we have an email. This is from Jeff Shortus and Jennifer Connors. Their address is 20 Indian Hill Road North. They write on February 8th, "We are writing to express support for Dan and Christy Flynn with regard to their building application. We live on Indian Hill Road North and have known the family almost 15 years. Dan has done work for us several times over the years and has great talent and expertise." Then another, this is from Debbie Connors. There's also an email on February 7th. She writes, and her address is 143 Indian Hill Road. She writes, "I received an announcement as a neighbor. This is my letter of support for the application for the Flynn Family Realty Trust. I live directly across the street. They're great neighbors, and Dan does beautiful construction." Then we have another email. This is from Suzanne Hefferman. She writes on January 27th, "My husband Lawrence and I wish to express our full support. The Flynn family are great neighbors who take care of their property. We fully support their efforts." And their address is 129 Indian Hill Road. Then we have a note from Joan Gillis Craig. She writes on January 26th, "My husband Jim and I reside at 130 Indian Hill Road and abut the property of Dan Flynn. We approve of the plan as noted and have no objections." That's Joan and Jim. Then we have a note. This is from the Gene L. Williams Trust. Roger Williams and Gene Williams are trustees, 59 Indian Hill Road. They write on January 25th. This is a notice of support. My wife Jean and I support any changes on the property." There you go. And that's the extent of the correspondence. So I'll ask now if there's anyone here in the audience or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak either against this application or has a specific question. Please indicate now so we can introduce you into the meeting.
There is no one that wishes to speak in opposition or has a specific question.
Okay, so we'll have questions from the board. We'll start with Paul.
I have no questions.
Dave.
I have no questions.
I have no questions, Steve.
Buck.
Buck has no questions.
Randy.
Randy has no question.
And I have none. Okay, Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Second.
We need a roll call vote. Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Veach, yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, deliberations. We'll start with Dave.
Not a problem with me, I'll vote yes.
No, it is certainly not substantially more detrimental in the neighborhood. It's an improvement. We support it. Meets all of our criteria.
Buck?
I agree, meets our criteria, and I will support.
Randy?
I agree with Dave Veach.
And I agree with Dave Veach.
And I do too. Okay, do we need to condition this in any way, shape, or form?
I guess I would ask Mr. Flynn, how long do you think it will take you to do this, and when do you plan to do it?
I think I'll do the barn first, so we're gonna have to, put everything in there. And then I was thinking of starting September 1st, so.
I see no problem, I think, and you would be able to contain all of your vehicles and so forth on site in terms of construction?
Yeah, the barn is I think it's 30 by 40. Yeah, we'll be able to fit a lot in there, so.
Okay.
All right, I'll move to approve the application as submitted on the basis that construction activity and vehicles would be contained on site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner, and construction will not begin until after Labor Day.
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call on that. Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
Paul votes yes.
Dave T?
Dave T., yes.
Dave E?
Dave Veach, yes.
Dave N? Yes. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much,
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Flynn.
Thank you.
I got it. All right, Sarah, 22-005.
Application number 22-005, Douglas Russell, 130 Sawyers Lane, Marshfield, Mass. 02050. Owner of property located at 339 Training Field Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 12J, Block 18, Lot 10A. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the construction of a deck. The existing dwelling is non-conforming, and that is located 22.9 feet from the southwesterly abutter. The proposed deck will be non-conforming, and that it will be located 20.1 feet from the southwesterly abutter, where a 25-foot setback is required. The lot is non-conforming, and that it contains 41,780 square feet, where 60,000 square feet is required in the R60 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw.
I told you it'd be quick.
Thank you, thank you. I am a homeowner, and I'm here today in front of you as a sponsor of this project at 339 Training Field. I am not going to be as eloquent as your previous speakers. I feel like it's a fairly cut and dry request. I bought the property this year, and when I bought the property, one of the issues that was there is it has nowhere to sit outside. It has a walkout basement. There's no patio down there. There is no deck or any outdoor space to sit. It's all just wooded and grass. I am bound by some conservation land in the back. I went in front of the Concom last night and was approved to proceed as shown on the plan here. I did talk to them about maybe putting a patio structure down in the back, but in conversations with Concom and honestly personal preference, a patio was more invasive to the area and the adjacency to the conservation land, and the plan to have a deck on helical piles is a much less invasive strategy to gain outdoor space, and it's directly accessible from the second floor or the first floor, and that's the strategy I took. So the lot is non-conforming. It's bound by a property line, and It's already non-conforming with the steps that are there, and I'm asking for flexibility to proceed as shown on the plan.
Does anyone on the board wish to hear the criteria from this gentleman? No. Okay, good for you. So anything else to say, or you're all done?
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anybody in the audience, either here or on Microsoft Teams, that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, please indicate now.
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor of this application.
All right, I'll read the correspondence. The first is from Nikki Smith. She's the conservation agent for the town of Chatham. She writes on February 10th, they were heard at the Conservation Commission meeting yesterday and have been approved. The permit will likely be issued this week or the beginning of next week. There were no changes to what was submitted or proposed. And then we have a note from Judith Giorgio. She writes on 2/8, I have no concerns regarding the proposed deck extension at this property. The plan shows the deck does not encroach on the existing leaching system. That's the end of the correspondence. Is there anyone in the audience who either here on Microsoft Teams who wishes to speak either against or has a specific question on this application? If so, please indicate now.
I see no one that wishes to speak in opposition or has a specific question.
Okay, questions from the board. Dave Veach.
I have no questions, Dave.
Buck.
Buck has no questions.
Randy.
No questions.
I have no questions.
No questions.
Nor do I. Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Needs a vote? Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes. So deliberations. Buck?
It certainly meets all of our criteria. You didn't have to tell us. And it's not detrimental to the neighborhood, so I'll support.
Randy?
I agree with Buck.
Paul?
Certainly not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. That step down, going down the backside there would be pretty tough to make, I'll tell you that. That's pretty steep, so I think it's a good idea to make the improvements.
I agree with Paul.
And I agree with all previous.
Okay. So don't I. Paul?
I'll move to approve the application as submitted. I don't see a need for any conditions on that.
I don't either.
I second.
Buck votes yes.
Paul votes yes.
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes
I
yes.
vote yes. Congratulations. That's a unanimous vote. See, it was worth the wait.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a
And
great
your
evening,
patience.
everybody.
So let's see, any other business, anybody? Can't run around yet? No running off, Randy.
I have a conflict with one of the applicants next time. I don't know when it's.
It's cold down at this end.
Say that.
We can talk about it if you wish. Anyway, we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, everybody gets to vote.
Buck
Buck,
votes yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Paul,
All votes yes.
Paul,
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave.
Dave Veach votes yes.
Dave, I vote yes. That's it. Thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen, in the booth.
6:23.
Well, I don't think we...